Okay. Thank you so much for being with me. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Eno Mfon. I am a caregiver for my dad, David Mfon, who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in about 2014.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. And do you mind sharing how old he was when he was diagnosed?
Yeah, he was in his early 50s. If I'm correct, it was about 51, 52.
Okay. Okay. And now, do you live with your father? Does he live with you?
Yes, he lives with me. So in my house, it's got kind of a big house. So it's my dad, my mum, my two cousins, and my brother.
Okay. Awesome. Now, in terms of caregiving responsibilities, would you say you're the sole caregiver? Is there a responsibility sharing or task management?
Yeah, so my mum is the primary caregiver for my dad.
Okay.
And then we also have two carers that come in the morning, and we have two carers that come in the afternoon as well. And then for the rest of the evening, we all kind of, take the role on as a family, as a unit.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing. And in terms of sort of what happens with those carers in the day and the afternoon, are there specific tasks that they need to accomplish or support your father with?
Yeah, so before it kind of progressed to the stage that it's at now, the carers were able to shower him, they were able to feed him, and it was kind of like the morning task. So clothing him, all of those things happened in the morning. It's kind of progressed to a stage now where he's actually sort of unable to get into the shower. It's just because it's so physically difficult for the caregivers to do that. So it's now that they're able to kind of clean him up, and try and brush his teeth as much as possible, feed him, clothe him, and then again in the afternoon, he has his medicine given by the caregivers, and he has dinner given by the caregivers, and then we've just started to have this kind of walk around the house, with the caregivers as well, for a period that wasn't really sort of possible because of his sort of mobility, but we've been trying to kind of bringing that back into his routine. So yeah, so that's in the afternoon. It's mainly just sort of the daily routine of getting him up, getting him dressed, getting him sorted, and dinner.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that the progression changed a lot of what their role is. I would say from diagnosis in 2014 to now, are there any sort of stages that you could describe or that was physically you were able to see and then things progressed and you're at now?
Yeah, definitely. I think in the beginning, towards the early couple of years, my dad was actually able to, walk around pretty easily. And then it became a little bit dangerous, to the fact that he used to kind of wander outside the house. And then we got assistance, we got a tracker that was put on him, and an alarm on our door. So whenever he would leave the house, we would be alerted. And the caregivers were kind of aware of that. So initially they were able to kind of take him on walks and things like that, as well as he was actually able at that stage to feed himself. He could actually use his knife and fork to a varying degree. It was still a bit of a struggle, but he could feed himself, and he was able to, like stand up if you say get up, and go to the bathroom. He was able to kind of take those instructions, but as it progressed, he could no longer take those instructions. He couldn't understand them, so he has to be lifted up from his chair now. He has to be physically sort of walked everywhere, and he's not able to really take walks outside as he was before. So it's very, very limited now. His movement is very limited. It's full assistance. We actually, in the beginning stages, he was upstairs, so he had his room upstairs, and he was able to kind of, with a little bit of assistance, just come downstairs and have his shower and things like that. But it got to a stage where it was literally impossible for him to make that move from upstairs to downstairs. It became very difficult, and it was quite a hard process to actually admit that we need to just change the whole kind of structure of the house. So we actually turned our living room into a bedroom for him, and he now has a bed that he facilitates his abilities. So yeah, a lot has kind of changed over the last couple of years. It's really different from how it started. So there's just a lot more assistance now.
Okay. And I would say at 2014, when the diagnosis happened, do you want to walk me through that process? Was this something that essentially made sense at the time? Was this something that you think the diagnosis was leaning towards, where the symptoms leading towards this prognosis, or what was it like before then?
Yeah, so I'll explain briefly how we got to that point. So my
Mhm.
dad was actually a psychiatric nurse,
Okay.
has worked that for a very long part of his life. And he started to make mistakes at his job, and we knew something was off, but we thought it was actually sort of depression. So we kind of just randomly quit his job, and we thought it was that he had just got entered a stage of depression, and he kind of stopped eating, um, and he kind of stopped walking around. He was really just sort of like in the dark room in the living room, and we thought that, oh, is this depression? But actually we didn't know that he was experiencing mistakes and knowing that something was wrong with him, but not being able to communicate with us that, okay, something is really wrong with me. I can feel that I'm making mistakes. Even near car accidents that he had, he knew something was wrong, but he wasn't able to admit that to himself and to us. And so we kind of came up with our own sort of analysis for it, and we were wrong. Unfortunately, it progressed. He started to wear his clothes back to front, and he started to again get a little bit aggressive in the fact that he would demand that he goes outside and goes for these walks, which just became a little bit dangerous. And so we really knew that, okay, something is definitely wrong with him. And when he started to show these physical signs of, you know, dressing back to front and all of these different things, that's when we got the diagnosis that actually he had early onset Alzheimer's. um that's when it made sense to us, but before then, like I said, we just thought it was, you know, this just depression.
Hmm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think building off of that, once receiving that initial diagnosis, one, there was an answer provided. How did that feel, just receiving that information? Then two, immediately post, what was the sort of reaction in terms of these are the supports that I'm going to be looking for? Were you provided with a community or sort of a step by step on how to take this? How did you and your family manage what would be coming in the future?
So when we initially got the diagnosis, I think it was in a way a bit of a relief, just because we
Hmm.
understood what was happening. But it was very, very, very difficult, because at that stage he still had some awareness, so he would ask the question, what is happening to me? And it was just that kind of the painfulness of him sort of knowing that something's wrong, and we know now what is wrong, and we know how, well, we hear stories of how Alzheimer's can be. At the time, I don't think we all understood it ourselves, but just knowing that this is where it might end up was really, really painful, really, really difficult. Um, and initially, I think we weren't prepared for it, of course. So we didn't know what sort of things we could ask for. We didn't know what sort of support we could get, and for a very long time, we struggled. You know, like I said, we were kind of just go like sort of going with the rope, like we're just kind of
Hmm.
figuring stuff out by ourselves
Hmm.
as we could. So things like not knowing that we were able to get certain, like a bed for him and set up a room for him. So it was a very long and difficult period where when he was sleeping upstairs, um, and us having to sort of care for him full time by ourselves, bringing him downstairs, showering him all ourselves in the morning before work, before school. We were all kind of just taking turns to try and deal with this ourselves. So we didn't know what support we could get, and we didn't know who we could speak to. And there was initial, obviously he had check-ins with the hospital, with the doctors, and they kind of followed his progress. um, but it wasn't until, I think, he really couldn't walk without assistance, that is when we started to really sort of get, you know, physical help, and the carers became, um, it was just so necessary. The two carers, we had to get two carers at that point. But before then, like I said, we were pretty much just trying to make it work by ourselves. And there was talks about him going to a care home, but
Hmm.
my mum and my family were very strongly determined to keep him at home, and I strongly believe that that's what's kept him this long. Just the love that we have for him, it's just allowed him to survive, really.
Okay. No, that's, I mean, it's incredibly difficult what you're describing, receiving a diagnosis like that without an immediate this is what I'm going to do next. What
Yeah,
really is what you're describing is rolling with the punches, which
yeah,
can be extremely hard. So I think there's a couple questions that I want to go off from here. But first, I really liked what you said about the love that your family is providing, providing a lot of value for your father. I'm wondering if you are able to tell sort of what things bring him joy, when he's the most happiest in the day, when he's the most sad, and sort of that gauging of mood.
yeah. So I don't know if I can actually share this with you, but I used to do, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this?
Oh yes, yes.
So when he first became, yeah, well, yeah, when we got the diagnosis, and in the first sort of 2 years, he he really actually wanted to go back to. He started to kind of speak about his past a lot. So
Hmm.
he would speak about music, wanting to go back to Nigeria, wanted to go back to, he used to be a DJ. So we started to play music for him, and he would absolutely love it. And he used to be an artist in Nigeria as well. So I decided that, you know what, I'm going to hold his hand, and we would paint together sort of every day as kind of like just something for him to get out of his mind a bit. And at this stage, he really knew what he was kind of doing, and he used to be so proud of himself. He would literally be like, oh my, I'm an artist again. Like, he was able to understand, sort of what we were doing together and the time that we were spending together. So we did lots of those paintings. We would take him on walks to the garden, and he loved that as well. As time progressed, those things became sort of impossible to do. He actually would struggle so much with the paintings that he would get a bit frustrated and disappointed in himself. So it quickly changed. He will go outside into the garden, but again, because it was so difficult, you could just see there was more frustration there. So that was kind of painful to watch. The things that he loves the most were now almost becoming a disappointment to him, because he wasn't able to do them in the same way that he could before. So he lost a lot of his passions in the process. But one thing he hasn't lost is his love for music. If you were to play, Fela Kuti, all of those sort of Nigerian musical legends, if you were to play some of that now, to this day, he would still start to tap his hands and tap his feet and start to nod along, laugh, and sort of dance in his chair. So that thing with music has never died. It has never died. And we really take advantage of that. So we play jazz for him every day. We play the traditional Afro beats for him every day, and gospel music for him every day. And he responds to it. He really does. So that's one thing that I can definitely say that he hasn't lost.
That's beautiful, honestly, and that drawing or painting was amazing. Wow. Okay. Sorry, I'm at a loss for words. That's really nice to hear. In terms of the relationship with your father, over these last couple of years versus before, how do you think that has evolved? Typically, I mean, when we look at the stats and the things that we as an organization just communicate, is that there's a dual role strain for caregivers being a family member as well as a care provider. But those, outside of just the dichotomy of those two roles, it's an emotional change as well to that relationship. How have you wrestled with that, and what has that the toll that has taken on you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I have sort of really struggled with it. I think in the beginning, when I was able to, I could take my dad to sort of the bathroom and the toilet all by myself, and I could help as much as I could. But physically, as the years went on, I just wasn't able to do it, and I would get extremely sort of, I would feel this guilt in myself of not being able to help him in that way. And I think that took a toll on my emotional relationship with him as well. There started to be a lot of guilt that I felt. I got to a point where I would just sort of feel like because I wasn't able to communicate with him, and then I also wasn't able to help him physically in some ways, and I wasn't able to, just get a response from him in many ways. Even a conversation or a joke wasn't, nothing would come from it. So I just felt a lot of sort of guilt, I think, that my relationship with him just wasn't there. And when you don't receive anything back from a person, it becomes quite difficult to even spend a lot of time with that person. And me being a young, I'm 25, just turned 25, but obviously this has been a couple of years now. So me being a young girl in her 20s, you know, I'm out and about, or I'm in my room working, studying all day. I could easily be in my room all day. And then the guilt comes of, oh my gosh, I haven't, you know, spent time with him. I haven't been there for him, or I haven't just sat with him, even if it's just in silence. And so I think I have in the past, and even up to now, I'm still sort of hard on myself, and I'm still sort of trying to just navigate that and sort of figure out where some of that comes from, and where some of that guilt comes from, and just trying to sort of see how my relationship with him now can really flourish, even with the sort of the limitations and that are in it. It's such a new relationship. I think I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and she just said to me, you know, your dad is not the same person. Like, he's not the same person as he was before. So it's a completely new start with him. And so I think I'm just trying to figure out, what is this new relationship? What is it? Do you get, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it's just, yeah, it's about trying to build a new thing and know that, okay, it's not the same as it was before. It can never be the same as it was before, but there is a way of discovering a new relationship with him. So I'm just trying to sort of understand that.
I think you bring up a fantastic point, because it's very hard to not hold on to memories you hold of an individual. But as that individual begins to change directly in front of your eyes, it's sort of wrestling with, this is the old that I love, this new is uncertain, and I don't know how to provide care or be the best person in this situation. So you're wrestling with that, as well as doing the most you can to support. And you're very clearly demonstrating the burden that can place on an individual. I'm wondering if there's been opportunities for you to sort of de-stress, or what is your way to provide some joy back into the situation for yourself?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things for me is the fact that I'm doing this with my family in a sort of crazy way that I guess maybe only caregivers will understand. There is a lot of humor in just the experience as well, of the struggling, of the making the mistakes, of the just, you know, the days where everything goes wrong. When you have that sort of community, even if it's just your family, and you understand each other, and you know exactly what the other person is going through in that situation, it brings some humor to it. It brings some, do you know what, we messed up, but we got this kind of thing, and we go again tomorrow. So there's that kind of attitude in my home. And it's just, I think without it, if I didn't have that, if I wasn't able to, you know, look at my brother and look at my cousin, look at my mum and be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're going through, and because we're in it together, I just don't know how I personally would have sort of survived this experience. And then secondly, one thing that I have found very recently, I hadn't really spoken about my dad much outside of these four walls, outside of my family. But recently I've decided to sort of go a bit public with it, and I've used my social media account as a way to sort of express myself and express sort of the things that I'm learning, and some of the things that I think that my dad is teaching me through this process. So I've started a sort of online journal called Daddy, Alzheimer's and Me, where I'm just kind of talking about my experience and how my faith is even helping me to sort of navigate this whole experience. And even in that, it's again brought me and my family closer together, because now we're all sort of looking through old memories and old photos, and just sort of laughing about it, and just creating this journey, these stories together. And I think that's helped me a lot.
That's amazing. And I think you have a beautiful Instagram account as well. And I think for all of our followers who are listening to this and engaging, please check out her account and give it a follow. It's phenomenal. And it's a really wonderful way to sort of show the journey and have that outlet through social media in a constructive way. I think that's something that we are really trying to build as an organization. Just there's a lot of hardness and hardship that comes with this caregiving relationship, but I think a lot of positivity can come from sharing and building memories outside of sort of what's happening currently, but what you've experienced with your loved one, connecting with other folks all over the digital world who have had similar experiences. I think there's a lot of disparate voices of folks who are feeling something similar, but uniting them is the best way to do that. So I think social media is a fantastic way to do that. I'm wondering now, with you moving forward in that direction, as well as a couple years into this diagnosis and experience, how has support for you changed, in whether that's within the United Kingdom specifically, or online or tool-based? Are there sort of resources that you look to, or groups that you're a part of, that have been able to provide some value?
I think, if I'm honest with you, I'm kind of
Hmm.
only just discovering these
Hmm.
resources are out there. So even your organization, for
Hmm.
example, I think before I started sort of putting myself out there online, I genuinely, although I knew that there were, other caregivers out there, I genuinely have not had a relationship with any other caregiver, or even had much of a conversation with any other caregiver. And I realized through doing this that, oh my gosh, it's just been me and my family in this sort of bubble. And just in the last, I've only made about 3 posts, and just in those last 3 posts, the responses and the people that have reached out just to say, oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing, or just the sort of pages like yourself who have reached out to me and supported me in just it's been a couple of weeks, has been really overwhelming, if I might say so. I never knew that there was such a community out there. So I'm only just discovering these platforms, and just spaces to even speak about this. So it's all pretty new to me, but I'm excited to sort of find out more and see what's out there.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that. I think we'll do a little bit of a transition just into sort of the what could support you the most. So we are a tech company. We're hoping to make a difference in the health space through caregiving and assisting families experiencing dementia. But outside of what it is that we currently have planned, something that I like to ask is, if you had unlimited resources for technology and anything of the sort, what would you want to build in terms of what tools do you think would support you? What would make your life and your father's lives better?
Wow, that's such a good question. I think one of the hardest things is sort of managing the time. So, for example, in my house, I think one of the things that we struggle with the most is that we have to do most of our sort of physical labor with my dad when we're all our most tired. So it happens just before bed. Obviously, we are the ones that sort of put my dad to bed. We take him to the toilet, we get him cleaned up and changed. And it's usually 2 of us. So it's either me and my cousin, who is about like early 20s, or me and my brother, or me and my mum. And it's a very physical task. It's very exhausting. And sometimes it's straight after work, we come home, and we have to do it. So I think if there is some sort of app that either sort of monitors our our daily scheduling, that makes, because what we will also try and do is make sure that my dad has at least 10 minutes to walk in the evening as well, just before bed. So I think that we just don't sort of schedule ourselves well, or maybe even have sort of a rota. We've tried it a few times where we had like a sort of family rota, that on this day, it's me and my cousin that are looking after my dad in the evening, or this day it's me and my mom, and those rotas have kind of just fell apart. So it's literally, I could be in bed and I'll get a call from my brother, like, come downstairs, we need to do that.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, I was just
Mhm.
in a dream. But I have to do it. So perhaps if there was some sort of app where their families are able to have this sort of organized sort of routine, whether that's doing times and schedules, or a rota of some sort, I know that that would definitely help my family.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for that information. That's super helpful as we continue to design our application, as well as for anyone else who's listening to this. I think that caregiver support is something that has traditionally fallen to the wayside when it comes to first focusing on the individual who's been diagnosed with a disability, a disease, or disorder, and being able to provide as much medical and emotional support as possible. But the folks who are also providing that care, it's incredibly taxing.
Yeah.
And I think what we initially started to name this series is Everyday Caregivers, but I think what we've added to this is Everyday Caregiving Heroes as the title. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what it is that you are. I think you and your family are doing a phenomenal job in an extremely difficult situation. So I appreciate you taking the time and continuing to do this.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Of
so much.
course. Okay, so we're gonna stop this right here.